Okay, time to rock out. Welcome to Kerouac Alley, and on behalf of City Lights and our dear friends at Alta magazine, indeed, it's always a pleasure to be able to host events in Kerouac Alley on the ancestral homelands of the Ramaytush peoples. Always an honor and a pleasure to be able to do so. As many of you know, Alta is a fabulous journal. It's all about California and the West, and it offers these amazing essays, investigative reporting, book reviews, really unique cultural perspectives. We have some of the new issue at the front counter. We hope you will look at it. We also have this book that City Lights published by Lew Welch called Ring of Bone, a wonderful little collection. And so it's especially auspicious as Lew Welch was very much in City Lights' orbit, and we got a chance to publish this book. We are celebrating issue 32 of Alta, and inserted into the issue is a pullout folio, and the journalist Brad Rassler has produced a piece on Lew Welch, which he is here to talk about tonight with our dearly beloved Garrett Caples, who is the poetry editor here at City Lights, a really amazing poet in and of his own right. And of course, we have this amazing cast of readers. We've got Peter Coyote, Patrick Dunagan, Judy Halebsky, and Kai Snyder. So, for the uninitiated, Lew Welch was a poet associated with the Beat generation. Of course, he was friends with Philip Whalen and Gary Snyder. He published and performed widely during the 60s. He even taught a poetry workshop at the UC Extension from 1965 through 1970. Donald Allen included Welch's poetry in the New American Poetry, which is an important anthology of mid-century poets. So despite his success as a poet, Lew Welch struggled with bouts of depression. He was a very complex, very enigmatic figure, to say the least. And we hope to give you a little bit of a window into his life and also into his poetry. So to say a few words on the behalf of Alta, I would like to welcome now Beth Spotswood, who put a great deal of work into today's event. And Beth, welcome.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I will be as quick as I can. It feels magical to be in this alley, especially talking about Lew Welch. I feel like, maybe his presence is here tonight, which would be kind of incredible. I'm here tonight because Brad Rassler has been so incredible to work with. And I Went Southwest, this folio, he spent months and months and months researching, working on. I know he worked with Peter, he worked with Gary Snyder, a number of people in really digging deep into the life of Lew Welch. Alta Journal, if you're unfamiliar with us, is a quarterly magazine making stuff like this. No one else is doing this right now. This gorgeous magazine features folios like this. So tonight, for Brad, for Lew, if you subscribe, I gotta do my PBS sales pitch here. You get 4 gorgeous issues of Alta. We'll give you this one tonight with the Lew Welch folio in it. 3 more coming over the course of the next year, and a special gift. It's a charming book of cartoons. It's 25% off. You can find myself or one of my Alta compatriots. There's Tanya back there, or Amy. We're really hoping to just get a handful of subscriptions tonight to keep us going, keep us doing work like this. I also do want to thank our partners, City Lights, who allow us to charge us nothing to come and take over this beautiful alley. Flatlander Films is recording this. So for your folks that can't, they're making an incredible documentary about Tom Frost right now, so stay tuned for that. But this will be recorded for posterity, thank God. And I want to give a shout out to Blaise Zariga, our editorial director, who edited this piece, worked so closely with Brad, and couldn't be here tonight and really wishes he could. It is now a thrill of a lifetime for me to get to introduce actor, screenwriter, director, author, the voice of America, Peter Coyote.
Beth, you forgot to mention how they found me in the bulrushes. So I've played big rooms, I've played small rooms. This is the first time I've played no room, which seems really appropriate to Lew Welch. A little history. First of all, I'm very honored to be here. I'm honored to have worked with Brad and anybody who celebrates Lew's memory, who was my friend, my roommate when Magda threw him out because he would get too drunk to bear. And you may or may not know that Lew was the stepfather of Huey Lewis and the News, who brought Huey to Olima, the commune that I lived on, when he was 14, scat singing bebop in perfect pitch. So Lew Welch was the person who introduced me to Kai Snyder. And Lew Welch came to Olima, and if I can find this, I'll read a poem that he dedicated to me. So, oh, here it is, thank you. So Olima was a 19th century abandoned farmhouse with about 5 bedrooms, a 5-gallon kerosene hot water heater, and no electricity, where 20 of us lived and made apartments in the barn, and I turned a horse shed into a house, and there was a lot of excess of every kind, but there were a lot of creative souls that came through, and Lew was one of them. He would come and camp and dry out and do whatever. And the story I want to tell you about Lew was he was at Olima one day when I think Wheeler's Ranch or another commune came by, and we were making a lot of music. We made good music. We had congas, we had fiddle players, we had guitar players, we had just maraca players, and we had Carla, the world's sexiest mother at 16, dancing bare-breasted in front of Lew with a whole bunch of other girls. Lew sitting on the ground with a bottle of Almaden in his lap. And he turned to me and he raised one finger like this and he said, and I quote, "The world's worst Persian voluptuary could not imagine our most ordinary day." And then he passed out unconscious. So how can you not love and honor a man like that? So, and also he introduced me to Kai Snyder, who was the first man who showed me what the life of a Buddhist might look like in America. And although I can't call him my teacher, because in his Rinzai tradition that means something else, he was my first teacher, my first mentor in what's become a lifetime practice. So this is a poem that Lew wrote called Olima Sartori for Peter Coyote, and it goes: walking from the gate to the farmhouse, buzzards wheeling close as 20 feet to the west, a ridge of redwoods, fir, that goofy point-raised pine. Walking on a dirt farm road, small birds darting from the grass, cows, burnt hills, tongue of the Pacific, ridge and the tongue of the Pacific, ridge and the last ocean, my boots walking. This is all you get, Olima said. And I said, that's twice as much as I could ever hope for. And Peter said, you can have the whole thing with fur-covered pillows at the same price. So I'm going to read a piece from Brad's fold-out fascicle. What did you call it? Folio. Thank you so much. I'm giving away second-rate schools. Here we go. This is a wonderful thing. It's worth subscribing to Alta for this alone. I promise you. I who know and have been around Lew and his friends and for many, many years learned so much from this that I didn't know. The note found in Welch's Chevy van on the morning of May 24th made that clear enough. His overwhelm and worries after he arrived on the San Juan Ridge. But despite his commitment to a manifesto of pellucid poetics, he'd left one key sentence in his last bit of prose uncharacteristically murky. Quote, "I never could make anything work out right, and now I'm betraying my friends. I can't make anything out of it. Never could. I had great visions, but never could bring them together with reality. I used it all up. It's all gone. Don Allen is to be my literary executor. He's the one who did Modern American Poetry 1945 to 60, the Bible for me and my friends in college. Use manuscript at Gary's and at Grove Press. I have $2,000 in Nevada City Bank of America. Use it to cover my affairs and debts. I don't owe Alan G. anything yet, nor my mother. I went southwest. Goodbye, Lew Welch." I went southwest, he wrote. Welch had walked away under his own power, presumably of his own volition, not having fallen prey to a serial killer, not having been abducted in a national park, not having slipped on glacial polish hiking in a remote defile. Neither had Welch been caught short by a late winter snowstorm in the backcountry, nor had he blundered up a 13er on precisely the wrong day that spring. Welch's was not a disappearance of the 20-year-old solo explorer Everett Roos variety. It was also not a Christopher McCandless type of tragedy. Welch, the unwitting victim of his own romantic or quixotic impulses, like the young man memorialized in John Krakauer's Into the Wild. It would appear that Welch perceived something dreadfully awry, something he could neither fix nor cast off. So he walked away from it, to spare others the pain of dealing with him and himself the mortification of knowing that he'd likely cause others pain, living as he would be in a tight-knit community, no place to hide, because, in fact, Lewis Barrett Welch Jr. would never change. It wasn't the first time Welch had walked away. Walking and 100-yard dashing away from it ran in the family. His mother did it by hopscotching into homes as though trying to elude her shadow. New schools with each move and new names with each marriage. From Phoenix to La Jolla to Los Angeles, Coronado, El Cajon, La Mesa, Palo Alto, and later, after the kids were through with high school, Berkeley, Ithaca, Burlington, Santa Barbara, Reno, and finally Sonoma. There were also marital false starts. 3 marriages to the father, Lewis Barrett Welch Sr., plus 1 to an El Cajon citrus grower, John Hathaway. Lew Sr. would die at 48 when Welch was 19, and Gig Welch, Welch's sister, at 47, 4 years after Welch disappeared, both of cirrhosis, alcohol as their means of walking away. And then there was Welch himself. His mother, Dorothy, had enrolled him at Palo Alto High as a Brownfield, her maiden name. So it was Lew Brownfield, the teenage track star and standout halfback, the speed demon with the snaky footwork, the snooker champion, the actor, the dashing kid with the bow tie, a patriot readying his peers for the military. And then the adult Lew Welch, who abandoned cities and women for the mountains, and then the mountains for the cities and women again. But this, the last and most famous of Welch's withdrawals, would freight his narrative with the kind of branding that would have caused him to think twice about disappearing. Quote, "The poet who wanted to be eaten by vultures," reads a JSTOR daily brief written for the Digital Library in 2018 to tee up an introduction to Welch's corpus of work, referring specifically to a poem called Song of the Turkey Buzzard, in which Welch posits that one of his friends will have, quote, "proper instructions for my continuance." This is to say that Welch had selected someone to rend his corpse and on, quote, "marked rock following his orders, place my meat." We're talking about a groaning board for buzzards here, folks, with Welch as the main course, although given his underfed frame, a rather stingy one. Notwithstanding, acclaimed writer Maxine Hong Kingston's thumbs up in the first line of the JSTOR piece, as if to assure the curious that Welch was legit, the best dead beat poet they'd never heard of, this, quote, last will and testament section of the Song of the Turkey Buzzard has been called Welch's true suicide note, serving as apologia and rallying cry for those who would fetishize the man's death. Thank you so much.
And now we're going to have Brad and Garrett talk a little bit.
All right, I'm Garrett Caples, do poetry editing at City Lights, and can you hear? Okay. So yeah, we're really gonna dig in MC style here, but I was gonna be funny because Brad had asked me, don't give me something open-ended like who is Lew Welch. So I thought it'd be funny to be like, who is Brad Rassler? No. But what I mean by this is how do you turn on to Lew Welch? Like, you see, you're a writer and a climber. Is that? Yeah.
I think that Welch represented. I understood Welch. I saw him as a kind of a composite character of other people I'd written about, type of people I'd written about, and the myth and the mystery and his larger-than-life persona appealed to me. And the fact that he walked into the Sierra and was never seen again seemed to remind me of other things that I'd read, kind of in the outdoor adventure genre, and other things that I'd written.
And but how did you turn on to him at all, though, is what I even wanted to know.
So I think I talked about this when Alta interviewed me a couple of weeks ago. When you're a freelance writer, you're either finishing a piece or you're researching the next. And I was researching the next. I had a friend who sent me some poetry. I went to Poetry Foundation website, was messing around, eventually got to the JSTOR Daily Brief piece about the poet who wanted to be eaten by vultures, and started reading, and that was it. I mean, all the components of the piece and of Lew were really there. And here was a guy who was larger than life. He was an outdoors guy. He was an incredibly appealing, charismatic character, and I just, as we say, augured in. I mean, I got way into his story, and that was it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm fascinated because, like, it's not. It's a different purchase altogether in the sense of, I know him in a very inside baseball way from the poetry world, and especially because working here, knowing many people who knew Lew, and I'm fascinated by how someone turns on to a poet, in this context, and so. I thought I'm juggling a little bit of the topic, but so people have a good enough sense of Lew, what happened with Lew, that he walked off and is alleged to have killed himself, or that presumably, not alleged, but presumably killed himself. So it kind of puts him in the kind of Ambrose Bierce world of a writer.
Yeah, he did presumably kill himself. He thought a lot about suicide, actually. He wrote about suicide. There's a remarkable letter, unsent, unfinished, to Robert Duncan that he wrote from Bixby Creek down by where Ferlinghetti had his cabin and still has a property, where he talks frankly about the need to kind of abolish self in order to cultivate a very clear kind of perception that would allow him to write the kind of poetry that he wanted to. You know, there are some who believe that he was talking about the suicide of ego, not literal suicide. And I think that that's true. He says in that letter, you don't need a gun to commit the kind of suicide that I'm talking about. It was just the absolute getting rid of, or as he used to say, getting out of my own way. He needed to get out of his own way in order to write the kind of poetry he envisioned.
Yeah. I mean that branches off on several things that I wanted to touch on. But let's jump to the chase on just the idea of as the piece that Peter Coyote read for from Brad's article. It ends on the note of suicide and the fetishization of that as like that's what's interesting about this poet. And it's like I'm finding it's almost impossible for it not to be in a certain way, just given what is known about his biography. You know, it's almost impossible, and also it's so embedded into his poetry itself. I was struck by I read the David Meltzer interview over again. And again, that was one of our buddies. Like we knew all these people who knew Lew, and he says I'm forgetting now the first poem he really turns on to, besides Joyce Kilmer's Trees, is Robert Service's On the Wire. And I don't know if people know Robert Service. It's an old-ass poetry reference, but a World War I poet, you know, sort of, battlefield poet. And that's a poem that's totally about suicide. So in a certain way, it seems like it's, or what would you say to the idea that it's bound up in his poetic ruminations to the point where it can't not be part of the coverage of Lew?
I'm assuming that you want to talk a little bit about the fetishization aspect. I think, first of all, what are we doing here right now? The piece was green-lighted, I imagine, because Welch disappeared. It's a mystery. It's kind of true crime. There's intrigue. There's mystique involved in Lew's story. So, I think that I critique the fetishization, and by that I mean paying more attention to, the transfiguration, the cycling into, another form, into the form of a turkey vulture, that people, have given a lot of weight to. At the same time, did Lew rate this 13,000 word piece because of the quality of his poetry, or did he rate it due to the fact that he disappeared? And people have made up all kinds of stories about what happened to him. I would argue it's probably the latter, even though he was a worthy, great poet. But I mean, if you're going to write a piece about somebody whose output, just based on output, who might not have received their due, why not write about Philip Whalen, right? So I think that, yeah, maybe I contributed to the fetishization, the death and afterlife of Lew Welch. But I also tried to debunk it. I tried to see through it as well.
Well, I'm somewhat, or raises further questions in terms, I mean, in a good way. That's what interviews are supposed to be. I'm wondering.
He's got a PhD in English literature.
But I have to. But the more relevant thing is I have to write marketing copy for City Lights as an editor here. No, and that's for real. And like I realized, like it or not, it doesn't matter what the fuck I think. People are interested in poets more than they're interested in poetry. It's just true. And in order to do something that it'll sell enough copies to make this massive machine of City Lights make our effort pay off, it's like you are selling a poet to. And I say this as a poet, but I got a marketing devil on my shoulder who doesn't care about my poetic principles, and I have to sell poets based on shit like that, but I don't think the brevity of the output reduces its impact to me. That I feel like he is one of he got himself on there. He's one of the important poets of the 20th century, in terms of ones that came from the United States. Do you think, or?
I think you're the poetry editor here. I mean, I think you have a little more perspective. But yes, I'm not a poet. I came to respect poets a great deal. I believe that you have this kind of, just like a great visual artist has, the ability to perceive things that maybe aren't available to the rest of us. Certainly not to me. So even though I haven't steeped myself in the world of poetry, I was aware of the fact that I was writing about a poet. I was also aware of the fact that maybe I was writing about a poet in a way that very few had written about before, and maybe in a way that would actually expose this guy to a broader audience than, if they had just happened upon Ring of Bone on the shelf. So I thought that maybe I was doing Lew a little bit of a favor. There's a little bit of back and forth is Elaine here anywhere? Elaine Katzenberger? At the beginning of the piece, she and I, this was a real conversation. We were talking about Lew's poetry. She said, yeah, his poetry is a gateway drug. And I said, yeah, it is, because it's accessible. Super accessible, but super deep. And she thought, wow, if people got into Welch, maybe they'd get into other poets and just enjoy the genre more. So I think that I was aware of that when I was writing this. A non-poet writing about a poet for the benefit of poetry, in a way.
Yeah, no, and I'm sorry, I'm not mean to harp on that, but it's fascinating to me just in the sense that almost everybody I know who does anything about poetry is a poet, and they don't not exist, but people who have read poetry who aren't poets are a very small group in this world. But well, yeah, I was curious about that whole topic because as a person who has had to write copy, and trying, and just there are things that I think are cool that I can't bring here because of maybe 200 people in America are interested. But there are other poets that you're like, well, if I can get 700 people interested in it, I mean, those are the kind of numbers you're talking about with poetry, for real. Uh, so you got to make those kind of judgment calls. And Lew was definitely a good, good, accessible, and also known at the time. And it some of it comes from the fact that Donald Allen, who was the editor of Lew's of Ring of Bone, he had a press called Gray Fox, and he basically he had worked for Grove and had got Lew a contract with Grove, and Lew killed himself like right before that book came out, and you don't know what the effect of that is, in the sense that Grove didn't put that book out because it's like you want a living poet out there promoting his book, and so it did come out as a kind of more significant kind of collected poems that was done by Donald Allen with his own press, Gray Fox. And City Lights kind of houses Gray Fox because he was very close to Lawrence and Nancy and the whole City Lights crowd. And part of it was like, let's we have this, he's in the catalog, let's do it. But it was actually way more successful than I think we imagined at the time, even.
Ring of Bone? Ring of Bone was?
I mean, when we released it in like 2013, yeah.
I think that one of the things that, and I'll bet Patrick and Kai and Judy have some stuff to say about this too, but yeah, I mean, I think that the Grove, Lew received his advance from Grove. But the thing just was taking longer and longer and longer to come. And this is one of the things that demoralized Lew towards the end. It's like, where's this book, that we've been talking about for so long? I need this book to come out. So, but yeah, anyway, back to you.
Well, I think this is a good time to bring up our first interstitial reader, or our second reader, Kai Snyder. And we'd like for you to read whatever you want to read, or say whatever you want to say. Do you mind going up to the podium, or yeah?
So I'm Gary Snyder's son, and Gary really would have liked to have been able to come today. He wasn't able to make it. He's 95 years old. He's actually still doing really quite well. He's still mobile, up and about, and in pretty good health, but not as energetic as he once was. He was originally, I think City Lights and Alta had been hoping that he would be able to read tonight here. But he wasn't able to, so they asked me to, so I'm here. And also, I have a little bit of connection to Lew personally, as is mentioned in the article. I was very young, but I have some of my earliest memories actually are from the time when he disappeared. And I can only guess that it was because there was maybe a highly sort of emotionally charged atmosphere and a lot of activity with people coming to search for him. But I have a really early distinct memory of him walking away in the twilight, and I was sitting on the porch at our house, and I yelled after him, Lew, where are you going? And he just sort of turned around and looked at me, and then turned and walked away and walked off into the darkness. And I remember crowds of people gathering around and hushed tones, and walking off into the brush, searching for him. So I didn't really understand what was going on myself. At that time, I certainly learned and understood better when I got older. But that's kind of, my connection to it. And then certainly I grew up hearing about Lew. It became kind of a legend. And Louis Blue Cloud, who's here in the audience and is also mentioned in the article, grew up thinking about Lew and later searching for his remains. So I'm going to read one of my dad's poems that he wrote about Lew. It's called From Lew. It's in the article, although the title wasn't mentioned in the article. Lew Welch just turned up one day, live as you and me. Damn, Lew, I said. You didn't shoot yourself after all. Yes, I did, he said. And even then, I felt the tingling down my back. Yes, you did too, I said. I can feel it now. Yeah, he said. There's a basic fear between your world and mine. I don't know why. What I came to say was, teach the children about the cycles, the life cycles, all the other cycles. That's what it's all about. And it's all forgot.
Kai, do you want to hang out for a minute and we'll.
Sure.
I want to talk about the encounter now with Gary, which in a way is the great drama of this piece from the perspective of being a journalist and dealing with people. Because I'll tell you, as a poet, Gary was probably the most forbidding person that I've encountered. And I've encountered all the kind of famous beats who are still alive. And Gary was terrifying. Terrifying. And so my first question is asking him if he found if he did find Lew's body and fed it to the buzzards. And I'm like, man, I don't know anybody in the poetry world who would ask him that question. And that's what's fascinating about, the approach that you're taking as an investigative journalist. And I wondered if you could talk about this whole encounter with Gary.
Do you want to talk about it? Do you remember?
When Brad asked that question?
Yes. Yes, very much so. Because I feel like, if it was 10 years ago, the person who asked that question wouldn't be alive. Like Gary would just get. But I mean, that's just like, again, he's a very authoritative, scary guy when you're a young poet. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what can I say about that? He doesn't suffer fools gladly. I think he had some ambivalence about the article. He certainly has a lot of ambivalence toward journalists, and as any sort of public person knows quickly, you have to be careful around journalists.
Yeah, because I know this from talking to McClure a lot when we were publishing McClure. He was very cautious about dealing with, the Washington Post called, and like he doesn't want to do it because you feel like there's a lot of chance to be misrepresented and people attributing things to you. Is that what Gary is?
Yeah, for sure, and for being represented in an unfavorable light, and slipping up and saying something that didn't come out quite right or something like that. And this article has a little bit of that in it. Brad accurately represents some of his standoffishness initially when Brad came to interview him, and he wasn't ready to just jump in and start talking in the beginning until he, I think, felt like he had a little better sense of Brad, and so gave some kind of terse and not real revealing answers.
He started
initially.
attacking my adjectives.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that, though? Like, do you have an example, or? I'm just fascinating.
But I should say once he warms up to people, he also can be very generous
And he was
forgoing.
incredibly generous.
Yeah.
We started talking climbing a little bit. Do you remember? And he told me about his adventure on the east face of Mount Adams, and we got into a completely different kind of a conversation, which seems to have shifted things. The beer helped too, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
So how do you, in terms of the craft of being a journalist, and I've done this sort of thing myself, and I used to interview rappers who were very dangerous and terrifying, and throwing you a million curveballs that you got to roll with. Do you enjoy that, or is that part of the fun of this whole pursuit, or is it, immensely stressful? I suppose it can be both.
No, you roll with it, and it all becomes material. If you are, dissed, were you ever dissed? If you are, it's great material. You just take it and it becomes meta, and so there really is. You had your chain pulled. Then you know. Yeah. No, it's all good. You're trying to capture some essence of truth, and that's really all there is to it.
But how was his reaction ultimately? Like, do you think you had won enough trust from him that he wasn't irritated by the question, or was he irritated by the question, or? I'm just curious because it's such a heavy question to ask.
You're talking about the question?
Yeah.
The question.
The question, right.
Oh, and have we not? Maybe we haven't clarified this. Yeah.
I asked.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, a number of people have assumed over the years that Lew Welch, who walked away into the brush on Bald Mountain, which is adjacent to Gary and Kai and Gen's property, was found by Gary, and that Gary and company gave him Lew the sky burial that Lew wanted. And that was the question: did you find Lew and give him what he wanted? It was just a question that had to be asked. You're not a journalist if you don't ask that question, and I don't think anyway. And it was difficult to do because I have great reverence for Gary Snyder. Was that obvious? I don't know whether it was. I tried not to make it, but I just needed to know.
So actually, I don't think that was a big question for him, to tell you the truth. And I think the reason why is because, you know, living there, as Louis knows and other members of the community, you know, this is a community. There's a lot of people, or maybe not that many, but it's a tight group of people. You couldn't get away with doing something like that without it being known. And he's also not really that kind of person. So yeah, it was never a serious consideration on his part or on the part of anybody in our community.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a case of like, man, I've had a ton of poets tell me to do some crazy shit, and I usually just nod and say okay, but I wouldn't do it. Like, did you really think it was possible, like, that Gary had done this? Though that's what I'm fascinated by, like, because it never even occurred to me. Yeah, I don't know, you know what I mean? That, like, I'm used to poets asking me to do outlandish stuff that I'm just like, okay, I'll do it, but I don't do it.
Is Ewan Clark here by chance? Ewan wrote Lew Welch's biography, He Leo, which is really worth reading. If you want to learn about Lew, you'll read Ewan's biography. Yeah, I mean, there were people who considered that possibility, yes, and brought it to my attention, and I considered it as well. So I was following my curiosity.
In your conversations with Gary Snyder, it would seem like one of the questions, like before Lew Welch left his note and went into the bush, they had a moment of conflict, right? And so, which I'm sure you can tell better than me, but I think it was about, like, they were walking and Lew kind of, for sport, like, shot a gun at a target and there were kids nearby. And so, and Gary kind of reprimanded him for this publicly. And so I would have thought the question was, like, do you feel culpable?
Which you do address. Talk about that a bit, because you do address this in your article, and that's one of the that he did leave journal entries about this, Gary.
Yeah. We can both answer this together. Gary did leave pretty, throughout the search, kept a pretty close journal. Not moment by moment, but he did talk about how, and seemed to reflect on the fact that he did tell Lew that, Lew, you'll never change. And this was all about Lew coming to the San Juan Ridge to change his life. Lew was really, here was a guy who was boom and bust. He was often trying to change his life, but couldn't really manage it. I think he saw Gary as a stabilizing influence. You know, David Schneider, who wrote the brilliant Philip Whalen biography, Crowded by Beauty, he and I had a conversation about necessarily, David had to become an expert in Lew Welch because Whalen and Welch were so close. In the same way that John Suter, who is writing a biography about Gary, is an expert in Lew as well. So, I was asking David, it seems like it would be pretty tough to compare yourself as contemporaries to Gary Snyder. Gary had his shit together. Gary was like an arrow. Gary was, all of the elements that you see in the Dharma Bums, which is what, Kerouac met Gary in 1955 and through to 56. All of the elements that Kerouac captured in that novel, I mean, Gary has gone on to basically actualize all of that stuff. All the seeds were there. Gary was incredibly directed. Lew was not. Lew was all over the fucking place. And, it was sad, but it fueled some of his creativity. But compared to Gary, he must. I think he could have felt marginalized, not quite as. You see what I mean? Am I? So, what was the question? I think that yes. Did Gary feel culpable? I never asked him. Did he feel guilty? I don't think I ever asked him that question. Do you think?
Yeah, I've wondered that too, to tell you the truth, and I don't know. He certainly has never expressed a feeling of regret or remorse, or that those words that he said were responsible for it. But yeah, I wonder too.
Although in the journal entry, he is reflecting on the fact that he said those words to Lew almost in a kind of remorseful way. He's thinking about it.
It occurs to him for sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, I could talk about this whole thing all night because it's a fascinating part of the article. But I want to bring my friend Patrick Dunagan, poet that we have just published at City Lights last September. Is that right? And I wanted to just drag him into the conversation a bit, but I wanted him to start with reading a bit from the book we published because, Pat is one of the Lew Welch initiates. Like Pat knows this stuff, and he wants to read some of this poem, and then we'll talk some more about Lew. As an example, though, of that, it is Lew's still alive in the poetry world out here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lew Welch was somebody that I've I say in the piece I address how long I've been reading him, but I started reading him very young, and then when I came to San Francisco, he was in the air of our conversations. So I'll just read some selections. This is out of my book, but before I get into that, a couple of years ago I edited the poet David Meltzer, who interviewed Lew Welch and is mentioned in the piece, and Garrett mentioned David too, and we both knew David. And his wife, Julie's here. I saw her, but maybe she's not here now. So this is just out of Rockdow, which is kind of a memoir sort of poetics that David wrote in the early 60s. And Lew Welch just appears a couple of times, so I was just going to read those passages. And the whole thing's about rock and roll. And David kind of thinking about that as rock and roll is becoming. The Beatles are just coming along. So the first time is, say, Dave, did I ever tell you my definition of fame? It's when people know you that you don't know. And he's quoting Lew Welch there. And this is like 63, 64. And the next part is he's talking, they're going to go see the Rolling Stones perform. And he's talking about Lew Welch driving cab, which is something that Lew did as to make a living along with fishing. And this is just a description. Golden Gate Park, Lew Welch, 2:30 in the morning, juiced, zooming, cornering, skid and screech, rubber stink, smoke, many moons ago. So maybe that was even like 62 or something, which seems a little too early, but I don't know. And so these are just some passages that's titled 25 for Lew Welch, which is on the occasion of City Lights republishing Ring of Bone. I was trying to write a review, and I write a lot of reviews, but I found it very difficult to write like a traditional review of the book. And so this was my response instead. I wrote these sort of 25 snippets, and it starts off with a quote from The Basic Con, which is a poem by Welch. Then they want the rest of us to die for it too, which I think sort of addresses a lot of the ideas that you guys are sort of discussing, and the pressures that he felt just kind of growing up, kind of a machismo male quality, and trying to match the expectations of the culture. I've been reading Lew Welch for some 20 odd years, longer than that now. First, I read Edgar Allan Poe, Allen Ginsberg, Walt Whitman, Hawthorne, Thoreau, others. Then I found out about Kenneth Rexroth, Gary Snyder, and Lew Welch. I had heard of Phil Whalen too, but he took a while longer for me to dig. And Whalen, that collected poems is 1,000 pages, which I don't know that means it is more worthwhile, as Garrett was saying. I mean, I think that, I love Whalen. I'll never get enough of Whalen. I'll never get enough of Welch. So Welch met Whalen and Snyder when they were all students together at Reed College in Portland on lawns where I once threw a Frisbee, several years ago with my pal Jeffrey Carl Butler and his son Austin. And then a couple of years later, went back to see the Jess show. Lately, I've been avoiding phone calls. I only talk to my mom. I owe Jeffrey up in Portland a good call one of these days. And that's just about how friendships endure through poetry. So when I read Lew Welch, I often think about Robinson Jeffers and vice versa. Robinson Jeffers was a poet down in the Big Sur area, Carmel. His house is of stone. If you don't know him, it's worth checking out. This is a quote of Lew Welch, "I am Roan Stallion," which was a poem of Jeffers. And then I always identified with a good pal of mine, Sunny Lynn Thibodeau. She was born August 17th. I was born August 16th. Lew Welch was born August 16th, 100 years ago next year. So we're coming up on his 99th birthday. I'm coming up on my 51st. Yeah. Both Leos were born August 16th. Leo Menagerie, Sunny Lynn Thibodeau, Lew Welch, and me. And this is a quote of the poet Joanne Kiger of Bolinas, who knew Welch well, and also a drinking buddy of his, Jack Boyce, was her second husband after her first husband, who was Gary Snyder. And this is just Joanne Kiger about Welch, when there was a big Berkeley poetry conference in '65. This is from a letter. "You know, Lew always cries when he reads, and it will ruin the evening." And then Huey Lewis of Huey Lewis and the News has been mentioned, and that's Welch's stepson. And at the last event when Ring of Bone came out, there was an event at the public library, and Huey Lewis was there, and he sang Welch's song Graffiti. And his mother, Magda, was there too. Dig it, the poet said. And you can find him singing that online, I think still via YouTube. So if you Google it, check it out. It's really delightful. It was really nice to hear him sing his stepdad's words like that. "Tall and lanky with a bursting head of red," describes Lew Welch if he was a good-looking woman. Before any poet bothers to write a poem concerning problems of rat infestation, they should be familiar with Welch's Buddhist bard turns rat slayer, especially if they, the poet, consider themselves to be Buddhist and are a professor at the University of San Francisco. I happened to work there and heard a poet read a poem like that. There are moments in Welch's poetry I find him to be the grayest of poets, and others when I have no feeling whatsoever for what he's doing. So I admit there's unevenness in the work, but it's just stellar work. Another figure locally around here for a long time was Cush, from the late 60s on, and he would sing Lew Welch. So he's still around on the East Coast now. But Cush of Cloud House is the biggest fan of Welch I know. Ask him to sing Lew Welch poems for you. I'm sure people have delightful stories, if any of you knew Cush, of him singing that. And then there's also errors that happen. So there's a bio of Jack Spicer that came out, who was a local poet, North Beach poet, well known. And there's a photo. There was actually a bio of Robert Duncan that came out. Apology. So in that photo of Lisa Journeau's Robert Duncan biography, that's not a bearded Welch standing back of a phenomenally drunk-looking Jack Spicer next to an elegantly young knockout Joanne Kiger. It's the infamously great poet Ebba Beauregard. And in another note, the photo that you mentioned in your piece, where they're all standing in front of city lights and it's all the poets gathered together, that was published recently in the SF Chronicle, and they failed to mention Lew Welch. Yeah, they mentioned Shig, who worked at the bookstore, but they fail say, hey, that's Lew Welch. And they mention David Meltzer, and his face is half cut off, but they don't name Lew Welch, which is crazy. So these are two instances of photos where Lew Welch doesn't get due. It's, one case not named at all, and the other case misnamed for a different character. And this is just, I briefly knew Joanne Kiger, so she appears in here a bit. This is from a Welch poem for a Kiger known by another name. How did she get all the way up this hill with one leg in a cast, on crutches, dead drunk, in that very modern party dress, 1:30 a.m., dirt trail, treacherous, with eucalyptus nuts, the night moonless and fogged over anyway. And then just a note, as a young man, he wrote what by far is still remains, I think, the most readable and enlightening of Gertrude Stein monographs, and that's published. And it'd be great to see some of this re-released maybe at the centenary. A collected Welch prose would be a wonderful book to see, and the centenary is just next year, as I mentioned. And then the other thing that I do in here is I sort of try to bring him, because I couldn't approach him from this kind of withdrawn aspect. I try to bring him to life a little bit. So, and it's kind of a new narrative, which is a movement from the 80s into the 90s in the Bay Area, where the fact and fiction kind of mingle together. There was a riot down off Market Street in San Francisco. Welch went to check it out with Ted Berrigan and Alice Notley. Outside a bar, they nearly tripped over Philip Whalen, who was drying out his feet, resting them on the unusually sun-warmed pavement. "Hi, Phil," said Notley, stooping down as Welch and Berrigan went inside the bar, each for a piss and a beer. In his interview with David Meltzer, Welch identifies Charles Parker and Jack Spicer as the two most hell-bent men on self-destruction he'd ever witnessed, which I think is sort of interesting if you think about, he was suicidal, but yet he identifies Spicer and Parker as being the most hell-bent, and he wasn't claiming he identified with that. And so back into the new narrative thing, my great-uncle Jack Pinkham lived in San Francisco during the 60s with his wife Mimi in a large industrial space over near Potrero, with his art studio on the roof next to a garden. Their space was the top quarters of a glass manufacturer. My mother would occasionally visit them there before her marriage to my father. She would sit and discuss the Bible with Jack. Lew Welch on occasion picked her up in his cab after she'd been walking by the bay's edge for a couple of hours and took her back to Jack's. He dug the rooftop garden and all Jack's sculptures scattered about. My mom and dad drove around in RVs. Once they drove up to San Francisco from Anaheim to see her Uncle Jack and also pal around with Welch. They went to the river, and Welch and my dad sat around smoking pot and drinking whiskey, shooting at ground squirrels with a .22 and a BB gun. Both of them broke down in tears when they killed a squirrel. So again, that's, this is new narrative, but I'm just trying to express something that I see in Welch's work. And this was just a closing image, and again, this shows some of the myth, because I mentioned a rifle, but it was a handgun that he walked away with, but we all got confused about that. Lew Welch on the ridge, breaking dawn, corduroy and rifle, glistening-eyed, gazes down. And then in closing, I just wanted to mention there was a film that Paul Thomas Anderson made called The Master, and I was reviewing Kerouac's collected poems, and the character of Quinn that's played by Joaquin Phoenix reminded me of Kerouac in a way. I don't know if people have seen The Master. If you haven't, go check it out. But what I realized is it actually reminds me more of Lew Welch. What turns out, when I was reading Ewan Clark's bio, Welch had a time in the Dianetics crowd, which is what The Master's based on. And his classmates, Peter Oser and Dan Drew, he kind of went on a trip with them. And they went up and down, from Florida to Chicago, New York City. These guys had money they were like, and so they kind of treated Welch to a trip. And so he was actually part of that whole scene that's shown in The Master. And one of them, I think, wrote a memoir that easily could have been influenced on the film. So if you kind of want an idea of what these guys were sort of like, I think if you see Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal, it sort of gives you a visual sense of the nonstop activity, drinking, sex, trying to be at parties, moving between class especially, is what's useful for me about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Well, yeah, this touches on, the posthumous legend of Lew, and how he's doing as a poet. And I mean, what do you think about the level of fame he has? Because from my lights as a poet, he's actually doing pretty good. As I mean, look at we got an alley full of people. It's awesome, and I'm used to poets can die and be forgotten, and they can be really amazing practitioners. And he's still in print. We got his work in print. I would like to put more of the other volumes in print. But what do you think of his overall place, as much as you can assess that?
He makes a lot of sense to me. I love reading Lew Welch. I think Lew Welch is more relevant today maybe than ever. People need to read Welch. He's easy to read, completely easy on the eyes, and his best poems really are, they resound, they make a lot of sense given what we're seeing in today's age, right? It's, he saw the environmental catastrophe. He saw the rapaciousness of, leaders. He railed against this stuff in essays that some of them have been published, some have not. No, I think I mentioned Taylor Swift in the piece, and the Tortured Poets Club. Lew is definitely at the top of the list, more than Taylor, maybe. But I think he, based on what I understand, based on what I know, he deserves all the accolades that go his way. He makes a tremendous amount of sense, and his words are beautiful.
Yes, I just kind of feel like he obviously could be better known in the way that every great poet could be, but I'm impressed with how much, again, people care enough to come to an event 50 years after his death. It's not every poet. There are great poets who don't get that. So that it's a good. Yeah. I feel like should we have Judy come up and read some poems? Yes.
Wow, what a fantastic conversation and wonderful poems. It's really wonderful to be here. I'm Judy Halebsky. I teach in the MFA program at Dominican University in San Rafael. And I am a Bay Area poet that's kind of from a younger generation. And one of the things that have really benefited me has been the lineage of Lew Welch and Gary Snyder and Philip Whalen and all the poets we've talked about. One of the things that they did was to open Mount Tamalpais and to do a circular hike around Mount Tam, like kind of establishing it as a place of contemplative practice. And there's kind of a route around Mount Tam where we can go and say kind of the same poems and chants that they did, like starting in 1967. And I do that 4 times a year. and the solstice and equinox. And we have also these kind of series of poems written about Mount Tam in response. So what I thought I would read tonight would be Lew Welch's the song Mount Tamalpais Sings, and my poem that was kind of in that lineage that was in a recent issue of Alta. So, and I'm really glad that I'm one of the last readers, because I think that this Lew Welch poem is really a real substantial poem that we can share. The song Mount Tamalpais Sings. This is the last place. There's nowhere else to go. Human movements, but for a few, are westerly. Man follows the sun. This is the last place. There's nowhere else to go, or follows what he thinks to be the movement of the sun. It is hard to feel it as a rider on a spinning ball. This is the last place. There's nowhere else to go. Centuries and hordes of us, and every quarter of the earth now piling up, and each wave going back to get some more. This is the last place. There's nowhere else to go. My face is the map of the steps, she said, on the mountain, looking west. My blood set singing by it to the old tunes, Irish, among these oaks. This is the last place. There's nowhere else to go. Once again, we celebrate the great spring tides. Beaches are strewn again with jasper, agate, and jade. The mussel rocks stand clear. This is the last place. There's nowhere else to go. Once again, we celebrate the headland's huge, cairn-studded fall into the sea. This is the last place. There's nowhere else to go. For we have walked the jeweled beaches at the feet of the final cliffs of all our wanderings. This is the last place. There's nowhere else to go. Okay, and this is my poem called The Consecration of Mount Tamalpais. I am a forest nun, have taken vows not of chastity, but of full body immersion, soaked through in an atmospheric river, peeling my underwear off like a wet swimsuit in the dark of the Muirwoods parking lot on the shortest day of the year. Not poverty so much as saying yes to anything without a timesheet or stock options, which is why I'm in sneakers with water collecting in the sleeves of my windbreaker. The trail around Mount Tam goes through dry ochre hillsides and redwood tunnels of mossy air, 15 miles from sea level to East Peak. My training is a coffee shop, a grocery store to build strength. I answer my daughter's questions. Are you going to die before me? When you die, can we get a dog? First, I carried her on my chest, then on my back, and now I hold her hand while she stops for each acorn, oak gall, and pine cone. I pile them in my pocket with the sticks and seed pods and this piece of paper. At the 1967 Human Be-In in Golden Gate Park, Allen Ginsberg urged everyone to do kitchen yoga, meaning to clean up. At an outcropping of green serpentine, we make a new vow. Women, life, freedom, translated from Kurdish and the protests in Iran, with women driving cars or showing their hair. Obedience? Is that really a vow? What about wildness? Ginsberg saw this practice as being a forest monk. There's no female line, but I can start from now. Expert that I am in kitchen yoga. Thank you.
And as we come to the top of the hour, really want to thank Garrett and Brad. Thank you so much for the conversation. And of course, Peter, Coyote, Kai, Judy, and of course, our dear, dear friend, Patrick. Thank you all for your efforts and for your interest in Lew. And of course, Blaze and Beth from Alta. Really want to send out a thank you to them. Always a pleasure working with them. We have copies of the new Alta at the front counter. We also have copies of this lovely book. So if this has piqued your interest, please pick it up. And hope to see you all again very, very soon. We have, oh yes, Patrick's book, which you can get in the far room. It's in with the City Lights poetry, and it's a lovely, lovely edition. Thank you all.